Thank you. So we're kicking off with project management today. And today I just want to do an introduction. And also thank you for everyone that was able to complete the template that I gave you. Some of you submitted a concept note, and some of you submitted a full proposal. Some of you submitted a concept idea or a project idea, but it's all useful for what we are going to do. Information that I requested in that document will be able to guide you through project management, project proposal writing, and then also monitoring and evaluation. So the interesting part is whatever I have requested, some of you covered more in project description, while others covered a bit more in project monitoring and evaluation, and others covered a bit more in a description of objectives. So that tells us that we are at different levels of understanding, but if we put that together, we should be able to navigate through the whole process. And I wasn't fortunate enough to get all your portfolios, and that meaning I don't know who is who. So while we are going through, you can just type for me what you are doing, what you are involved in, the type of work you are doing, whether you work for government or private sector, you're running your own NGO, are you a student, are you doing both? Are you doing business? Are you a volunteer? Whatever you are doing, because it's very important for us in project management to concentrate on such. Okay. Our learning objectives for this session is to distinguish between a project, a program, and a profile. So this is basically introduction, during which we will also understand project management and its importance. We are also going to understand the role of the project manager. I will briefly talk about the role, but within this, what I've incorporated for you in this curriculum is to understand that when you want to become a project manager, the processes that you follow, what you need to do, what you need to qualify for, and then the different types of projects. We will also talk about understanding the triple constraint model. So yes, that is for today. So today, again, it's still introduction. I will not keep you for long because I really just want you to get this foundation. So what is a project? When we talk of a project, we're speaking of a temporary endeavor or an attempt which is undertaken to create a unique product. It's either product or a service or a result. When it comes to result, we want to think of our developmental projects that we are working on. Service provision, usually, especially in the private sector, or it could be also developmental sector, service provision in government. I want to think of government as well. And then when it comes to product, we want to think of, want to put our mind around examples like ICT or any other product that you are looking at. This project is applicable in business, it's applicable in development and so on. So when we talk of project, I want you to compare it to the environment that you are coming from or where you are working. So the purpose is to plan, organize, and manage resources to bring about the successful completion of specific project goals and outcomes and impact. That's the purpose of a project. Projects deliver integrated outputs. In projects, we talk about deliverables. That which you need to deliver, which should lead to always lead to better outcomes or results for commodities and other stakeholders such as donors and also the community. Projects are time-bound and focus on requirements to deliver specific benefits for communities in ways that are cost-effective and measurable. Within this course, we are going to focus on development projects. I will here and there make examples of projects that we have in corporate sector. Corporate sector, they also deal with development when it comes to corporate social investment or corporate social responsibility. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but you should feel free to ask questions and also add on when it comes to discussion time. Again, what is a project? It's a sequence of tasks with a beginning and an end. I'm now describing the criteria for something to be called a project. There should be tasks involved. It has a beginning and an end, and it is time-bound, and resources, there are resources and desired results. It's temporary, and the results, causes change. It can be cross-functional, it's unique, but it can also be uncertain in the sense that once you get towards the end, you don't know if there will be a renewal or continuation of such. So that is a project. Once again, for us to understand what we are going into with what I will work with you in the time to come, you need to understand today what we are doing today. So a project is not more of the same. In other words, a number of the same type of interventions or the same type of activities. It's also not open-ended. It has a beginning and an end, and it is never without a focus. It is never without a focus. Amidst the many examples that I got from or received from you, some of you sent me a series of activities, and with some, I couldn't really put my finger on what project are you currently busy with. So that was also useful information for me to refer to when we are talking. So before I continue, I want to indicate that the ones that we received there were a number of projects. So I will just refer if necessary on the example. Some of you could be working in a program, and some of you could be working directly on a project. But you can have projects and programs within each other. So what is a program? A program is multiple projects. You need to understand what a project is in order for you to understand talking about a program. So if I work for an HIV program, then it means there are multiple projects within. There could be a PMTCT project. There could be an ARV project. There could be a project for expert patients, HIV patients. There could be a nutrition project. There could be a counseling project. All these falling under an HIV program. Those of you that are in development, we usually talk of programs. And especially if you are funded by big agencies like Global Fund on HIV and AIDS, USAID, the Swedish programs, these are the ones, or EU, they are the ones that usually fund big for the list, because I made a list of, one of you gave me an example with a lot of diverse programs, and I think I gave you a comment. I think I commented on that one. And my comment was that they should be, I would have loved to see which one is the focus at the moment. So the characteristics or the criteria for something to be called a program, there must be multiple projects. Secondly, there must be multiple donors. Thirdly, it's long-term in comparison with its projects. It's open-ended and it is not time-bound. That is why I'm saying You could be the owner of a program. If you say, I'm running a leadership program, under the leadership program, you've got different projects. You can have the training project, you can have your mentorship project, you can have a coaching project, you can have maybe a skills project, all falling under leadership. And they can be funded by different donors. Some donors prefer to fund training. Others prefer to fund coaching and mentoring programs. Others refer to fund, others prefer to fund skills like in vocational training skills. So that is what we mean when we say multiple donors. And long-term, it's long-term in comparison with its projects, because if you are running a program, you are a registered NGO, you are existed for as long as the NGO exists. And it's open-ended. So what we mean is I cannot register for something and saying that it will only last for 5 years. It's open-ended. With programs, if I decide to leave a program, even as the owner, I can always transfer it to somebody else. But the program doesn't necessarily die. It could be activities that die out, or maybe people that are implementing. And like we said, it's not time bound. So that's the difference between a program and a project. So thirdly, we're talking of a program portfolio. These are all the different components that you get in project management. A portfolio is then multiple programs, and portfolios you will find, especially in governments, you'll find it in private sector, in large sectors like government, the private sector. You can say NGO sector, but it's in very, very large entities where there's multiple programs. That the UN, United Nations, is an example of that. And then also long-term, it's long-term, it's ongoing, and it can have diversified funding. Sorry for that. Again, I'm repeating myself. I'm going slow because I need us to get the foundation. Program portfolio is multiple programs. It is ongoing, it is long-term, and they have diversified funding. And I gave an example of the United Nations. The United Nations has got multiple programs under them, and we call it organs, the UN organs. You have UNICEF, which is concerned with children. You've got UNFPA, United Nations Population Fund, which is concerned with population studies or education or programs. Then we have WHO, World Health Organization, which is concerned with health. Then we have UNESCO, which is concerned with education and science. So that is multiple programs under the United Nations portfolio. And you will see it's long-term, and the beauty of that is this diversified funding. We are going to talk into detail about the diversified funding when we conduct the session on a project proposal writing. It's very important for us to understand. I want to give an example. I worked for several United Nations projects, and one of the things that I have noted is diversified funding. So when you do resource mobilization and donor relations, there's a course like that as well. When you do that, you will learn how the United Nations are receiving their fund, where it's coming from. And it's important for us, like I said, we will do it when we talk of program proposal writing, project proposal writing, and so on, or writing for funding. It's important for us to understand diversified funding so that we can understand why we need to take care of such funding. Okay, so we have done 3 things so far. I've explained to you what is a project. I've explained to you what is a program, and I've explained to you what is a program portfolio. Okay, so we need to understand project. The criteria is short-term, or it's time-bound. It has a beginning and an end, and it's got a very specific focus. Then under program, it's a combination of projects That is program. When you have so many projects under a program, that thing qualifies to be called a program. Program portfolio is now multiple programs. Now, if you want to draw a pyramid for yourself, what you need to understand is out of the portfolio will flow different programs. Out of each program will flow different projects. And that is the first thing we need to understand around project management. Okay. Now, under project management, it's important for us to understand that I call it the 6 P's of project management, but it's 6 elements that are key to project management. Very, very important. Number 1 is processes. There's a process. I always say we are very good at starting up things and then looking at end result, but we are very poor at managing process. And this is not just for a project that, a developmental project, but many businesses fail because of processes. I think we all know that people are scared nowadays to start business. If you don't have a strong foundation or good understanding or a strong team, then you fail because people don't, especially us in Africa, we do not regard process. People go into things, they sign contracts, they look at end result, but they don't consider what happens in the road between. And that is what we call process. Now, I always tell people, because something is a process, it's important that we understand detail. Then secondly is people. No, there's nothing that functions without people. And the same applies to project. And then proficiency, there's passion, there's patience and perfection, which I have worked into. I've worked the patience and the perfection into the first, I think, 4 or 5 as follow. When we talk about people, sorry for that. I'm struggling here with my mouse. My mouse doesn't want to cooperate with me. So come on. When we talk of processes, what we are saying is, this is for the understanding of the project manager. And for this session, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a project manager so that you can understand. When we talk of processes, the in-depth knowledge of the project management process is very, very critical to a project manager. So sometimes there's no project manager title. You are the coordinator of the project. We are also referring to you. You're also in that position. In-depth knowledge of project management processes is very critical. Starting from the process groups per project management institute, that's important. We're talking of process groups. There are different groups within a process. And then project management framework from the project management body of knowledge. They call it PMBOK. I think some of you are familiar with this. Through the organization specific cycle, the life cycle, processes, to the scoreboards and other reporting requirements. The project manager needs to be up to date with the processes. What are we saying? You need to know your framework. You need to know the framework. You need to understand the cycle. You need to be on board at every phase within the cycle. You need to understand your scoreboards and you need to understand the reporting requirements. And not just understanding, you need to keep up to date with it. Following a standard set of processes always help the project manager to address challenging and ambiguous projects. So if you follow processes, that is literally what it says. But within processes, there are standards. So if you follow that, if you understand that and you follow it, you will be able to master great projects. And the processes help the project manager to ask the right questions to the stakeholders, bringing clarity to the scope and level, set expectations. Now, in this case, stakeholders are not just partners outside, it's also the individuals that work within the project and everyone that need to work with the project manager. Once again, processes are important. Projects fail because of lack of process. Businesses fail because of lack of process. Governments fail because they do not regard process. The processes are the areas where you tell yourself that there's so many great policies in place, but the policies are not implemented. Why? Because processes are not followed. Okay. Number 2 are people. People management is an integral part of project management. We will talk a lot about this when we are doing human resource management. So I'm just touching base today. Whether resolving conflicts, assigning the right work to the right people, that you need to underline, because we will talk about that in human resource management. I will give you a little bit more than usual when it comes to that, or keeping the team motivated and energized, building the team also, and people management is very necessary for such. One aspect of people management means acquiring the right resources from the beginning. Now, I've also seen in many projects, especially if you want to bring in your African mindset or your traditional mindset, people wait until a need arises and then they want to obtain resources. That is wrong. When we go through the processes, you will understand what needs to be dealt with from the beginning in order for the whole flow of the project management cycle. Savvy project managers, in other words, individuals that are really geared towards their project management, that are really connected to their project, they know they need to develop their teams. Motivation and recognition are critical components of project management. As I'm going through, you need to ask yourself, if you are a project manager or a project coordinator, are you doing this? Or you can ask yourself, if you are in a project, am I receiving this? The motivation, the recognition, and so on. So we say savvy project managers, savvy people that are, upfront, up to date, and they are zealous and they are passionate about it. So these are people that know that they need to develop their teams. They need to have the policy in place that will help people to obtain job satisfaction, that will retain people in a project. One tactic to accomplish this goal is to ask the team to design an award and provide the award to those who perform above and beyond expectations. I think even on this program that you are, the training that you are going through, you choose a leader, for example, and there are several things that you would want to see as well. And in a workplace setting or within an NGO setting, what we normally do is we assign tasks to the team. In companies, we used to have what we call a social club, and we ask this social club, how do you think we can connect this social club to the human resource management functions of job satisfaction, of employee retention, of dealing with attrition within the workplace. So then they come up with issues and we implement it. They will, for example, tell you, no, we need to do employee of the month. Because we used to only do employee of the quarter, or we can do employee of the year, or they can tell you what is more motivational. When I worked in the mining industry, for example, there's so many rewards there for people to perform. There was a time I remember that the mine workers were about to strike. And I was only concerned with employee wellness, but they were so stuck that the CEOs called me in. I worked at the Chamber of Mines, and they came to and they asked me for advice. And because it was an HIV issue, and the people were about to strike, they call it tools down in the mining sector, and the mine was going to lose a lot of money. And I asked them to give me 24 hours. I went to brainstorm, and I came to give them an idea, and I asked them to be off-site, away from the mine when I go in and implement, just not to provoke emotions. And I managed to convince the workers, I managed to convince the unions, but not to strike. I managed to convince the management to implement that which the workers needed most. I managed to convince the CEO to reshuffle some of his workers, and they sent me back and to ask them. They literally sent me to ask them, what do they want? And one of the key things there was they decided on their award, they decided on the change. You know, so these are things that you as a project manager need to know if you want to work in projects. In Africa, we only know sitting in an office, giving instructions, getting results, reprimanding people, and then do what we want with the resources. So people are important in a project. Project managers, PMs, should know the work styles, the strengths, the weaknesses, and the motivating factors of each member of the team. If anything, you also know the temperaments of the different individuals on your team so that you can be able, if you understand their temperaments, you'll be able to understand people. So people, again, is very important. This is the second slide on people. Sorry. Process. Come on. Don't know why the slides are jumping. Come on, why are they jumping? Okay, slide number 3. It's passion. While having a passion for the job is necessary for any role, it's important for the project manager to have passion for what he's doing. Why are we saying that? Sometimes somebody is promoted into a position and not necessarily an individual that passed an interview. So the reason why we say once you promote that individual, they must still be patient, because project management is a leadership role. A leader without passion cannot motivate people. They cannot energize the team. They can just not keep projects going. In addition, stakeholders will be able to differentiate a project manager who is passionate about managing the project as compared to the one who just provides a status report every week. People will know. People will know. You know, you will, because once a person is passionate, they'll be interested in how are the people doing that are on the project. How are the individuals? They will provide feedback to you on your performance. They will encourage you, and they will be there in the field with you, making their feet and their hands dirty at times. So it's a project manager's passion that facilitates successful leadership. What are we saying? You need to be passionate, because passionate is part of strong leadership, of good leaders, even though it's not the only thing. But for leaders, it's important that you are passionate. My slides are frozen. Number 4 is proficiency. The project manager needs to understand the project, including the business process it covers. The technology needs to be understood and involved, as well as other factors. Okay, so one example that I want to give is we are in a time of the 4th industrial revolution, where there's so much change in technology. A project manager needs to be up to date, to stay abreast. You don't need to be the one doing everything, but you need to be able to ask the right questions to your teams so that they keep you up to date as well. Proficiency is one of the traits that differentiates a project manager from a project coordinator and an administrator. You know, there are some organizations you walk in and you've been working with an individual or walking with that individual or 3, but you can't see which one is the project manager and which one is the coordinator and which one is the administrator, because you can't see the difference. So a project manager who doesn't understand the subject or matter loses the respect of the team and will have little control over the project, and you also have little control over the team as well. And you make room for sabotage, you make room for disregard of your work and the project as well. So there's also a characteristic where the team sees the project manager as one who manages the Gantt chart and not the project. So they will just see the person as doing that. And that also need to change in the characteristics of a project manager. And if this happens, the team becomes dysfunctional and multiple problems start surfacing. So if you are that individual that is currently working on a project, small or big, or on a program, it's important for you to understand. Or if you're experiencing undermine from your subordinates or even one of the senior people, perhaps you are just giving them that impression that you don't know what you are doing. Now, This is not something where you are going to fight people because they don't know. It's something that you need to demonstrate. Always, a project manager should always demonstrate his position. In other words, we say it's not going to be all talk. We see what you are or what you are worth it through the delivery of your work. So proficiency. And then these are some of the elements or the characteristics that we have discussed that is key to a project manager. Let me just fix this mouse. So we've spoken of people, we've spoken of process, we've spoken of proficiency, and we have also spoken of passion. Now, this is where I want to say passion alone is not enough. We are not saying that the person must only be passionate about it. But what we want to say is it's important for us to understand that the person need to have an understanding of process, of people. Understanding of people is easy to see. You can just observe how the individual work with people. In interviews, when we interview project managers, we've got case scenario questions that we are asking. We're asking them scenarios, and then we get to hear how they managed it, how they handled it. And that tells us, it gives us the information. Now, the next key element next to the processes or to the processes we've mentioned is the project management cycle. This is your foundation of your project. Very, very important. Anyone who understands the cycle is able to work within a project. One of the key advices I always give to people was an example of myself. When I worked in project management over this, I never knew that I would end up being good or seasoned in project management. The only thing I decided is every time I apply for a job at a certain organization, I study the environment and decide this is what I want to learn at this particular organization. So at one organization, you decide, I want to learn a lot about project monitoring and evaluation. In another organization, maybe, or in another position, you want to learn a lot about results-based management, performance management, and not just individual performance, but project performance. In another environment, you want to learn a bit about the epidemiology around all the social problems that you are dealing with and how you can use it in project management to either get donor funding or either solve problems in communities or to identify problems and so on. But wherever you go in life, decide what you want to learn, and that will determine how long you are going to work at that particular organization. Some of the things you want to learn, you could be sharp in, could be fast. Maybe you say you want to learn more about IT at this particular organization. And if you are sharp in IT, you learn a lot in a short period of time because IT is evolving. You need to be on your toes. In another organization or maybe in another position, maybe you've gotten a promotion or a new project. You say you want to learn more about project finances or resource mobilization and donor relations. And that is how I built my project manager's portfolio unknowingly. But it's about having a vision or a purpose for going into this field. Okay, so now our cycle. This is what the cycle looks like. In your project management cycle, it's simply your roadmap from the beginning of a project to the end of a project or closure. And one thing I've learned about the cycles, it all starts with an idea. It starts with a thought. And then you have your processes, and then you have your closure. One of the things that I also learned, and I want you to understand that if it's donor funding, you will work beyond the closure of a project. I'm not talking of physical work. You know, you get incidences where the project has closed a year ago and a donor comes back and they still want information, or 6 months later down the line, they're still asking, and you find that wherever the donor is sitting, they're still writing the report on what you have submitted to them. Another issue in the project management cycle that you need to understand is every element is handled or is executed by a different group within the project management team. Initiating usually starts with the project leader or a visionary, and that could be shared with a team that is supposed to implement. Then we get to planning, and in the planning process, everyone is involved in that process, because they will need someone who's going to talk about budgeting. They will need the project manager itself. They need officers and coordinators. They might need volunteers. They might need the HR expertise. They will need the fund development and the fundraisers. All those people are involved in the planning process. Stakeholders, partners, everything. In executing of the project, the same team with their different functions are applicable. However, in execution, it goes down to the lower levels of the project, because we have planned at this level and maybe with representation of the lower levels, but in execution, that is where you go down to operational level. So that is where the part where I'm asking you, describe the project. Describe the project. In the description of the project, we want to know every detail about what it is and every detail about how it is executed. And you will learn more about that as well when we are going to go into the details of maybe donor funding, donor relations. What we also need to know about this cycle is monitoring and evaluation is a different department within the project. It's a different department. It's a different skill set. It can be something very, very different. It can be differently funded as well. In most of the projects with the donors that I worked with, they want their own monitoring and evaluation person on board. So we then make provision for such in the budget as well, but also in the project description when you describe to them who is going to carry out what, and you indicate in the plan, the work plan as well. And in terms of project closure, it's now not just the project team, but you go back to your major stakeholders and your minor stakeholders. You go back to your beneficiaries as well. You go back to your donors as well, and so on. So in your cycle, you get initiating, number one, planning, number two, executing, number three, monitoring, and then closure of your project. And this is the foundation upon which we are going to base our project management. Now, the first one is not planning. Sorry, I've got a mouse that is really very sensitive. Very sensitive. It jumps every time I touch it. So look here where I'm landing. Okay, let's go back. Come on. Why is this thing so super sensitive? All right, let's go into the cycle. We said it's initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and closing. So the goal for this phase is to define the project. Initiating, that this process define your project. In your planning, this phase includes developing a roadmap for everyone to follow. The beauty of your planning phase, I always ask people, involve representation of every single individual department that will execute the project. And then in executing, in this stage, the project team is built and deliverables are created or adopted, because I want to believe for some projects, there will already be deliverables that you have spoken of in the planning process. So you adopt that against which execution takes place. And then there's monitoring. Project managers will monitor and measure project performance to ensure it stays on track. Very, very interesting for you to understand. The project manager also has a monitoring function. The finance manager also have a monitoring and a controlling function. But your key person here is your monitoring and evaluation officers or your managers or your researchers. It's all part of that portfolio. And then also the closing, the project is completed in this phase. A post-evaluation is held and the project is transferred to another team who will maintain it. Now, in some cases, the project is ended. The only time you transfer a project is Let's say, for example, your project is to implement taps for running water in a certain community or a county. Then at the end of your project is implementation. And then you pull out at the end of your project cycle and you hand it over to the community that will now utilize it. That is what we mean when we say, and the project is transferred to another team who will maintain it. And that team could be, the project is integrated into local government, it's integrated into the government in itself, and there's a functional person. Depending on the nature of your project and your execution. Okay, so that is your management cycle. Come on. Now, the number one in the management cycle, as you have seen, is initiating the project or project initiation. So the goal here is to define your project. Then you develop a business case for the project and you get your business case approved. And during this time, the project manager may do any of the following. There could be, why we say any, depends on the nature of the project. There could be a feasibility study. Now, what we do or what I would recommend is, if it is a totally new project, you will have no baseline. And you might not have the, okay, let me see. Are we together? Can somebody just put up a hand if you can hear me in the reactions? Just put up a hand if you can hear me. I'm seeing messages here that you can't hear me, so I'm not sure if it's a former message or is it now. Hello? Can anybody hear me? Let me
Yes,
just check it.
Doc, go ahead. You are very clear and loud.
Oh, thank you so much. All right. In your initiation phase, I said it's you define the project. Now, it could be that you only have a concept idea at this moment, and then you develop a business case for it. It's such a beautiful process. I really love this part of a project. It's just unfortunate that it's not the only part of the project. You develop a business case for it, and then you get it approved. Now, during this time, there might be a feasibility study, because if you come to me with a new project, I want to see results of a feasibility study. I want to see that a study has been conducted. There was one person who came to me and he wanted to start doing paper with pulp. I don't know if you understand pulp. Pulp is the substance, the starchy substance that you use to make paper. So he needed to go into an area and identify land where he can do trees or get trees. And I needed him to do a feasibility study for that. Now, that is not just for this. This is an extreme example that I've given you. But in Namibia at the moment, there are feasibility studies going on for very large projects, because we are implementing green hydrogen. So the beauty is we are making use of making use of young individuals, youth that are either final year or they just finished university. They're being sent to Germany to be equipped, and then they come back and then they do the feasibility studies in Namibia together with the teams that are doing green hydrogen. So there is also a need to create a project charter. Okay, before I leave the feasibility study, for projects, it's important, if it's a first-time project and you cannot afford a feasibility study, you must already know in your mind that there will be a baseline, because a project has got a beginning and an end. Your baseline, and then there will be an end line at the end of the project. If the project is 5 years, at the end of the 5 years, maybe in your final year, you will do your end line. If the project is 3 years, year 3 will be your end line. So in some projects, like one of the projects that we implemented that I ended up last year, we did a feasibility study in the beginning, and we did a baseline and an end line. The purpose of the feasibility study was for us to be able to determine whether the target area geographical target area and population that we are looking at is the right place to implement this project. And we discovered, yes, it is so. So after that, they needed to do a baseline. The baseline was done, and then after that, the project could kick off. Now, there might be a feasibility study. There might be a need to create a project charter. Project charter, I always recommend for very big projects that has got long, like 12 months, but big, huge implementations that involve change in staff, that involve change in structures, that involve implementation of, okay, let me say that involve construction, that involve HR. In other words, sometimes we need to restructure the staffing structure because of the new project that we are taking on. I remember we had once a project for children's villages, orphanages. So we called it the Children's Village Policy Project. So within this project, it was actually a policy that we needed to implement, but it was such a robust project that we could not just implement a policy on that, because the policy involved changing the structure of the houses that the children are staying in from, you know, a secluded, surrounded environment of 8 or 10 or 12 houses, but we wanted to make it into a street so that it can look like normal houses, you know, and reduce the stigma of all these orphans and vulnerable children that are staying with families. The second thing we needed to do is we needed to restructure it, because we needed to look at the type of staff we will need. We needed social workers, now needed psychologists, occupational therapists. We needed child and youth development coordinators. We needed managers, more managers. So we had to totally restructure dismantle the current staffing structure, the organograms, and we had to do a restructuring. And so that's a policy on its own. The first one is a policy on its own. This one is a policy on its own. These are now sub-policies falling under that. And then we also needed to do training. We had to retrain people in new things. We also needed to do assessments. We needed to consult with government, with donors, and so on. So we needed to develop a project charter. And then you can identify key stakeholders as well. So these are some of the work that you need to do, or that is needed in an initiation phase. And then select the project management tools. What are we going to use? The type of tools that we are going to use and the frameworks that we are going to use. So all these things need to be developed in the initiation process. So what we are saying is there's a lot of consultation that is taking place in the initiation. There's a lot of research taking place in the initiation. And there's a lot of engagement or identification of the appropriate or significant stakeholders. Who will be your key informants in your study? Who will be your key people that you will be working with? Who will be your donors? There'll be a lot of analyses taking place. Your SWOT analysis, your PESTEL analysis will be very, very broad. It will not just be the ordinary, and there will be a lot of meetings taking place. So that is your project initiation. This is a summary. We will do the detail as we continue with project management. And secondly, your second phase then will be your planning phase. What is happening in the planning phase? It's critical to creating a roadmap. You want to do your roadmap, and this is where all the details and the goals are outlined in order to meet the requirements laid out by the organization or by whatever we want for this project, even laid out by the donor. So you create a plan, you develop a resource plan, and you define goals and performance measures. You communicate roles and responsibilities to team members. You build out workflows. You know, this is a beautiful process where you build out your workflows, and you anticipate risks and create contingency plans. So If I have to choose a planning team of 6 people, I will have my project manager who will be part of the creation of the plan. I will have my resource mobilization officer or my fund development officer who will develop a resource mobilization plan, or who will be spear development of that component of the plan. And then we will have everyone together looking at defining goals and performance measures. Here with defining goals, I always love the project manager to take the lead, because remember, you are the visionary of the organization. So you put down vision, mission, and you cast it for the team. And then everyone can together look at defining and refining the goals that you are coming up with. And then the team together look at performance measures. And this is where M&E also come in when it comes to measuring. HR also comes in, the human resource managers. And then communicate roles and responsibilities to team members. That is a combination of functions from human resource management, but also from the project manager and project coordinators as well. Depending on whoever has somebody working under him is responsible for communication of a role. I always say, if roles are clear, then we can ensure a good flow of process. If roles are clear and people execute, there will be a better flow of process. Then you build out your workflows. You build out, this is also part of the planning process, where you do your mapping and, you give direction, you do your directions that you are going to take, who's responsible for what. Everyone get to understand his space. It's like a brick. If it's a wall, the wall has bricks and every brick fits into the wall. That is what is happening with workflows, different workflows for the different processes. And then you anticipate risks and create contingency plans. This is where the risk manager's brain comes into play. So you anticipate your risks. What are the possible risks? Now, when you write your project as well, you must always have what we call assumptions, because assumptions is closely related in project writing, closely related to how you are looking at the risks. For example, the contingency plan. What do you assume? What is there? What do you assume? What is there? What are the risks? What are your assumptions? And a typical example is the organization does not yet have money to run the project beyond the life cycle of the donor funding. So what are your contingency plans? If it's a nutrition project, for example, you can start looking at coming up with livelihood and food security. We always advise people to come up with gardens, for example, and where you can get crops, do some crop farming or gardens. If it's in town, we have in Namibia, we encourage home gardens, backyard gardens, community gardens, so that when the project funding ends, we know that people already have another place where they will get their vegetables from. We also know that by then individuals are trained on how to maintain the garden, and there are seeds where they obtain from wherever, because they have had crops already, but also we have trained them in food security. So these are contingency plans that you put in your project. So when you want to be a project manager, coordinator, leader in a project, you must always have plans. Remember, it is not money that keeps us alive. It is thoughts and ideas that keep us alive, not money. Thoughts and ideas keep us alive. I always tell people the answer to poverty is not money. It is thoughts and ideas. The answer to riches is not money. It is thoughts and ideas. If we value what we have inside of us as thinkers, it's important for us to understand we'll be able to develop our own nation, our own projects, everything. So it's important for us to understand what is happening in the planning phase. When you have considered all this, you can now go into strategic planning with your team. To me, I always call it's a very beautiful process, because the plan lays down the foundations that you will further walk on after initiating the project. Now, what I also want us to understand as we are going through, some of you will be very good or useful in the initiating project process. Now, It doesn't mean that you will not be good in planning, but there are those that are really outstanding when it comes to strategic planning, really outstanding. But every plan has also got an element of initiation within. So you are also useful here. And all you need to do is, if I'm in a finance, I always say finance, I use the word finance person. When I'm working in finance, if I'm the finance expert, I'm just as useful in planning. If I'm the fundraising expert, I'm just as useful in planning. So stakeholder engagement preparation is also important. Here we establish our goals and deliverables, identify your team members and assign tasks. Identify them and assign tasks. Develop a draft project plan. Define which metrics will be used to measure project success and identify and prepare for potential roadblocks. Now, in this instance, what we are saying is what will happen. First of all, you need to establish goals and deliverables. That will help you to identify whom you need within the team when you need to deliver or when you need to execute. Sorry. Then you identify those members and then you assign tasks. Now remember, this is a process on its own. It's not easy to identify team members. It's not a matter of saying, Joseph is good at whatever, let's take him. This one is good at what? No, 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 no. You need to look at the whole portfolio and you need to look at every single individual assignment for that person from the beginning to the end of the implementation process or of the cycle. Develop a draft project plan. You now develop your draft plan. You draft your plan. Identify which metrics will be used to measure the project success. This is where monitoring and evaluation comes in. And identify, prepare for potential roadblocks. Contingency, we say risk management is just as important. But also, you know, in projects, we also want to look at crisis management within a project because those are the unpredictables. And potential roadblocks is easier to identify than crisis, when crises occur. And then establish logistics and schedules for team communication. Remember we said earlier, there need to be communication to the team. So communication in itself is a function on its own. You establish your logistics and your schedules for your communication. Choose your preferred project management methodology. We will talk about the methodology. There are 3 different methodologies that I'll share with you. We will talk about it in a different session. Ensure your team has access and knowledge of the relevant tools. They must understand the tools being used within project management, whether it is forms that you are using, whether it is you know, the processes that we spoke of, whether it is workflows, they need to understand, you know, if it's algorithms that they are using, they need to understand the tools that are applicable to them. Then you schedule your meeting, you're setting an agenda. This is now just a bit of a detail of how you do the stakeholder engagement process. Execution, project execution. Deliverables are built or they are adopted to make sure the project is meeting requirements. And this is where most of the time, the money and the people are pulled into the project. When we are looking at donor funding, we will look at your project description because that speaks of execution. I deliberately asked you to fill out that part of the form. There's only one of you that didn't do the project description. And I think some of you had good projects, but you wrote as if you were careful or afraid of describing the project. And I actually wanted to see, because that tells us, that tells the donor whether you know what you are doing, whether you know what you are asking money for. And it also helps the donor to see which areas are not covered, because that is also credibility. So deliverables are built to make the project meeting its requirements, or to make sure the project meets requirements. So as previously mentioned, a kickoff meeting is held. I described the meeting earlier to mark the official start of the execution project. And then also instructions are given, sorry, introductions are given, who's who. Very important, very important. Remember, we need to be able to see who is the manager, number one. Number two, who is who. People need to know their roles. Your role is attached to your portfolio or your position within the project. And then you also do your project background. So why are you doing this project and what are your goals? Everyone needs to understand the goals of the project scope, what kind of work is involved in the project, and the project plan. So you are trained in public speaking in this course. Make sure you are at least able to do a pitch, a presentation pitch of the project you are working on, of the program you are working on, or the institution. If you are in a school, be able to pitch that. It's very, very, very important. Very important. And then the kind of work and what does the roadmap look like? You should be able in your pitch also talk about the roadmap that tells individuals, these people know where they are working, what they are doing there. There are some people that sit in offices and they don't even know what they are doing. Your roles, who's responsible for what? And then communication, what kind of communication channels will you use? What kind of meetings or status reports should your team expect? Now, communication is important. We've got the normal communication, the interpersonal communication, but we also have technology as well. In one of the organizations I worked for, they were part of the program. That was a program. Part of the program was one of we have ICT department, so they needed to improve on ICT infrastructure. That was the goal. That was the goal. So he needed to improve on the ICT infrastructure. And part of that was he had to come up with an ICT policy, he had to train everyone in the policy. And every policy is a component of the work that he executes, but also that which we also had to execute. And later we had to make sure that everyone understands, and we recommend that after training the whole team, you go from person to person, to individual to see what their needs are, their training needs, and what should be in place and so on. And then we have what we call the cockpit. For those of you that are in ICT, cockpit is the monthly report against which ICT report is given by the ICT individual. Now, he beautifully made it a project within the organization, and each and every function or every individual's role was given. Like, I needed to know what I needed to report on, which is business continuity. I needed to, that was my role. Another one reported on processes. Another one reported, HR reported on the fluidity of the policy execution. So each one had to report. And it's amazing that we had roles to play in ICT, and this was not an ICT, it was a child welfare organization, child protection. So it's important for us to understand our positions on a project if we need it to be successful and if we need funding. So tools, we need to know which tools will be used to complete the project and how they will be used. If anything, understand your reporting tools. If you don't have reporting tools and you are in a position to recommend develop tools, your templates are good to report on. Imagine I didn't give you a template and I said, each and every one of you must write a fully fledged project for me, and it must be so many pages, and this is what I want to see. I don't think by today I will have received maybe even one. But when we give a template, you develop, template is a tool, and then everyone can use it. When everyone is trained in those tools, and that's the work of monitoring and evaluation and the project officers as well. So, and the next steps, what are the immediate action items that need to be completed? Always know your next steps. And then you give, you're open for discussion. Always be open for people to have questions. If you can't answer it immediately, go and do research and give them the needful. So the next phase is controlling and the monitoring phase. This phase happens in tandem with the execution phase. So you can't have this phase separately. You don't execute and then you start controlling. So controlling and monitoring is done simultaneously. And that is why you'll find that you need to develop your monitoring and evaluation frameworks while you are planning your project. You need to develop your financial controls, the tools for financial controls while you are planning. It's part of the planning phase. Now, in monitoring and controlling, during controlling and monitoring, the project managers may have to do any of the following. You manage resources. You must know what the budget is. I always say the activity inform the budget, not the budget, the activity. Your activity inform the budget. I want to establish a skills program for children. You have your entire plan laid out, including workflows, and then you are going to cost it, because the activity must be there for it to be costed. That is why in project management, you must understand it clearly that it is the activity that will inform the budget. And then you will also work with stock resources, including human resource, as plans are executed. Okay, human resources, that is people. Monitor the project performance. As the project moves forward, the project manager must make sure all moving parts are seamlessly headed in the right direction. That is also very important. The M&E official will give us results, but the project manager will be able to analyze and dissect the results and see whether we are moving in the right direction. Risk management, also the project manager should be able to manage risk as it comes. And some projects have a risk manager as well, but it cannot be done in absentia of the project manager. Perform status meetings and reports, update report schedules, and modify project plans. Modification, we will talk about that when we talk about project proposal writing. Now, your project closure. Closure is a phase. It's not just an action, it's a phase. The closing of phase is a critical step in the management cycle. It signals the official end of the project and provides a period of reflection, wrap up, and organization of materials. Now, your project closure plan should be integrated in the planning process, in the planning phase. What we do is we say, come up with an exit strategy. Your exit strategy is developed in the same phase where you are planning your project before you start executing. But your exit strategy will be an evolving strategy based upon things that come up, issues that come up as the project goes. It could be contingencies, things you don't plan for. It could be additional funding that the same donor decide in the middle of the project, say, we add some more funding, then you do another new area as well, or you do A or B while this project is still. So it's important for us to understand our exit strategy. And in some cases, it will be a sustainability strategy. We have funded you for community gardens, and what is the plan to sustain the project after the end of funding? So then you come up with your strategy. Remember, I mentioned earlier, training. People are trained to continue. Seats are provided. Those are what we call exit strategies. You bring in expertise to do the exit strategy for you. And then you invite all stakeholders around the table and you decide. Take inventory of all deliverables. You need to take inventory of all the deliverables. How was it executed? So this is where we do best practice evaluations. We do end of project assessments. We do end of project evaluation. We do all those things. And then we see what comes out of that. Tie up any loose ends. The loose ends, people, are so important. In Africa, we love to do things in a careless manner and then loose end develop. For example, you have done so many trainings, 10 trainings, but you have submitted 6 reports and all the trainings were funded separately. So it means you haven't accounted for the 4 reports. You haven't recorded a report. You've got no report on the record. Now in the record keeping, we say anything not recorded is everything not done. And it's a legal issue. So these are loose ends. Or maybe you still owe a vendor. You were supposed to pay that vendor, that payment was overlooked. People communicated to you, you are the finance person, but you didn't prioritize it. So it's 3 months down the line, the vendors are still waiting for their money. Or the volunteers are not paid out. You know, these are loose ends. And they are on their way to the unions to report the organization. And you are at the end of your project. Or maybe there were some misappropriation of funds and it was missed in the system. So these are loose ends, loose ends. Or perhaps you had a very good project auditing process that particular year. Auditing was done, you had a robust report from the auditors and you were excited about the results. However, you never implemented that which the auditors has recommended. These are loose ends in a project. And why you could lose continuous funding from the same donor, or if you submit a proposal for some more or other type of funding, they might turn you down because of that. Then you hand the project off to the client or the team that will be managing the project day-to-day operations. So in some instances in government, for example, we did a child labor project with the Ministry of Labor, and we had to open a child labor desk within the Ministry of Labor at the end of the project. So what we did was, because we had an exit strategy of...
Mom, you are very low. We are sorry. You are very low.
That's it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but a little bit low. No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, good, good. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry, that was the mic that fell off a bit. My apologies. Let me start again with this slide. What was the last words that you heard? Hello? Okay, let me continue. We're talking about project closure. What I said in the beginning, the closing phase.
You are still low. I'm sorry.
Wow. Let me do this. Change the position of the mic. Can you hear me now?
Still low.
That's very interesting because I've got my sound on. I really don't know what is happening. I'm on top volume. My computer's on top volume. My sound is on. So let me just see. Can you hear me now? I don't know what to do. I've put on everything. Hello? 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 Hello?
We are hearing you, but very low. I don't know.
Am I visible now? Am I audible now? Can you hear me?
You're coming in clear a little bit, but breaking through.
Come on. It's not possible. Hello? 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 See if there's any volume that needs to be adjusted here. Mic.
Yes,
Hello,
you are
hello,
good now. You are good. You are
hello.
good.
But I haven't done anything. So I don't know, maybe it's the network, but my network is very clear. I haven't done any changes as I'm speaking, but thank you for that. I'm going to watch the chat box. Then you must just let me know again if we go into that.
Oh.
Okay. So we were talking about the closure of, I'm going to do this last slide again, or is there anyone, shall I just need an indication, where are we? An indication if I should do this slide one, or is there another slide that they need me to repeat? Let me do this slide and then we talk after that. We see the closing phase is a critical step in the project management life cycle. It's not just a matter of closure, ending of reports, no. It signals the official end of the project, and it provides a period for reflection, wrap up, and organization of materials. And I give an example of an exit strategy. Every project must have an exit strategy. And the strategies will differ according to the size of the project. Some strategies will be much smaller than the other. And then it's always, it must always include a workshop or a meeting where you have all the stakeholders around the table and you present results. And you have to take inventory of all deliverables. The strategy workshop, the exit strategy workshop is the best platform to do that, because the closure is a phase. Within this phase, you now begin to do your end line. Remember, we said baseline is done in the beginning, and then you keep that results, you work it, then end line. You now do an end line. That is part of your closure phase. And you do your end line, and you compare the results of the baseline with the results of the end line. When we started with the project, this was the situation. And when we ended the project, this is the situation. And you tie up any loose ends. I remember I gave an example and said loose ends could be reports not submitted, donors, volunteers not paid, or you skipped some months. It could be vendors not paid. It could be legal issues that have not been attended to. Like in Namibia, for example, when you have a project every year, you must submit tax return forms, even if you you must have proof of what you have done. If you need tax exemption as well, but you must submit proof. You must renew every second year certificate of good standing. So those must be there as well. And then there are certain things that you need to conform to. And organizations love to delay on such submissions. Those are loose ends. And then also donor reporting requirements that we don't conform to. Sometimes there are outstanding documents that they want from us, outstanding project documents, very important. Then you hand off the project to the client or the team that will be managing the project on a day-by-day basis. I made an example earlier and I said, let's say, for example, you decided to install water taps in a certain county and your project was the installation. And you started, maybe you pilot it for 3 months or for 6 months, but now you hand it over to the individuals in the community that will be in charge for the management on a day-by-day operation. I also made an example and I said we had a child labor project and the Ministry of Labor were the custodians of this project. So when the project ended, it was funded by the International Labour Organization. When the project ended, child labor didn't stop. So we had to make a plan. And within the closure phase, we implemented or we established a child labor desk within the Ministry of Labor. And we asked the Labor Ministry to put somebody on secondment to that desk. On secondment, the person works for the Ministry for Government, but the person is also responsible for the child labor desk. And then the ILO would pay for that position proportion to the salary until such time, the desk is settled, the person is, the child labor is totally integrated into the ministry. That is handover. So you do an official handover within the phase. How do you hand over such a project? That person works with us, the UN organ, for that period of time that we are handing over. So it could be for a year, that person already worked with us in the office. And we don't say the person, we train the person through a workshop. The training is hands-on as the person work with us until such time the project and the person does the work already. And then perform a post-mortem to discuss and document any learnings from the project. A post-mortem is literally you do best practices assessment. You can do an assessment of the end of project. We call it end of project assessment. There's also end of project evaluations. There's also best practices that is being evaluated. And there can also be just a workshop to bring all the M&E results together from the different stakeholders. And then you discuss it and document any learnings from the project. And important in project closure, you disseminate information. So another hint that I can tell you is when you want to attract more donor funding, have good records, have good reports. So at the end of that project cycle, you now report to the donors. You also report processes. If you make a full report out of all the processes you have reported, you can come up with a new project model. You have a new, that is proper reporting where people have really taken good care. What I've noted donors are doing now is they're looking for those new models. So one of the organizations that I worked with, what we did was we recorded the processes. Now, when you record like that, you also record your challenges, what you've dealt with. You can also see what you have encountered differently from the traditional projects. And out of that, new models evolve the existing project with the new experience, and the donors buy into that. They can even use it and put it out there. From now on, we are funding only A, Z, and E, and that could be your unique experience. So that helps with further donor funding as well. And your processes can also support government. If you are not a government institution, it can support government. They are always looking for answers. Make no mistake, even if they don't want to listen to you, they're always looking for answers. Now, in your project closure, what I've said is you organize all your project documents in a centralized location. Your documentation is very important. There's a rule of law in our country for certain type of the projects, the documents, you have to keep it for 10 months before it's confiscated. So it means you have to have printed copies of everything as well. And for certain documents, you keep 5 years. It could be 5 years could be certain positions, and 5 years could be also certain types of projects. Then you communicate the success of the project to stakeholders. And I said that what we normally do is we always have 100 plus stakeholders for our project. So what we do is the same people that get the annual report, there will be the stakeholders, but a bit more in this case because you need to go and take it to those that are conscious of the project, but they are not necessarily part of the stakeholders. And then you celebrate your project completion and acknowledge the team members as well. So this is good for you to understand, no matter how big or small your project is, always celebrate your completion with the with the members that have been part of the project. So that is what I have for tonight. Pertaining to project management. Come on, where are we? That is what I have for today.